My daughter-in-law stood in my penthouse doorway with luggage and a rehearsed smile, announcing they'd forgiven me and were moving in. Behind her, my son carried boxes like he already owned the place. They had no idea that the moving truck parked outside wasn't delivering their furniture. It was removing every piece of evidence I'd need to destroy them in court the following morning. The morning started quietly, the way most of my mornings did now. Coffee at the kitchen island, the Manhattan skyline stretching beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, Caroline's photograph watching me from its silver frame on the piano. 3 years since she'd passed. 3 years of silence in rooms that used to hold her laughter. I was reading the Times when my phone buzzed. Text from Mitchell, the doorman who'd worked our building since it opened. "Mr. Ashford, your son is in the lobby, with luggage, and a moving truck outside. Should I send them up?" I read the message twice. Marcus hadn't called, hadn't asked, hadn't visited in 4 months, not since our last conversation ended with him demanding I be reasonable about advancing his inheritance. I typed back, "Send them up." Then I sat very still and waited. The elevator opened directly into my foyer, a feature Caroline had loved, had insisted upon when we designed this unit 40 years ago. I heard them before I saw them. Vanessa's heels clicking on marble, Marcus's voice too loud, performing confidence. "Dad!" He appeared in the living room doorway, arms spread wide like we were reuniting after a war instead of a silence he'd created. "Surprise!" Vanessa swept in behind him, designer luggage rolling smoothly, her smile bright and brittle as spun glass. "Theodore, we've been thinking so much about you, all alone in this big place." I stood slowly, coffee cup still in hand. "You could have called. We wanted to surprise you." Marcus crossed the room, attempted a hug I didn't return. "Family shouldn't need appointments, right?" Vanessa was already surveying the penthouse, her eyes cataloging and calculating in a way I recognized. The same way Marcus had looked at estate sales before his business failed, the same way Caroline had warned me about, in her gentle way, years before. "He inherited your ambition without your ethics," she'd said once, late at night, when Marcus was 30 and asking for his third loan. That's a dangerous combination. "What's with the moving truck?" I asked, keeping my voice mild. Marcus laughed. Too loud, too long. "Right, about that. Vanessa and I have been talking and we realized we've let too much distance grow between us. Family should be close, especially now." "Especially now?" Vanessa stepped in smoothly. "After that incident last month when you forgot your appointment with the cardiologist, Marcus was so worried." I hadn't forgotten any appointment. I'd rescheduled it because of a board meeting, but I understood now. They were building a narrative. "So we decided," Marcus continued, "to move in, take care of you, make sure you're not alone." "The guest rooms are fully equipped," Vanessa added, already walking toward the hallway. "We won't be any trouble. Think of us as family support." I watched her disappear down the corridor, heard her opening doors, inspecting rooms. Marcus remained, watching me with that eager expression that had once charmed investors out of millions they'd never see again. "Dad, I know we've had our differences, but that's in the past. We're here now. We're family." I set down my coffee cup, looked at my son, 44 years old, wearing a suit I suspected was rented, standing in the home his mother and I had built together. "Of course," I said quietly. "Family." They moved in that afternoon. I observed from my study while they filled the guest wing with boxes, with garment bags, with the accumulated debris of lives I suspected were unraveling faster than they wanted anyone to know. Vanessa directed the movers with sharp gestures. Marcus kept checking his phone, tension visible in his shoulders. Mitchell appeared in my study doorway around 4, his uniform crisp as always. "Mr. Ashford, a word?" I gestured him inside, closed the door. "The movers." Mitchell's voice was low. They're not from any company I recognize. Two of them have been asking questions about building security, about your schedule, about whether you have live-in staff. What did you tell them? Nothing useful. Mitchell's jaw tightened. Sir, I've been in this building since construction. I know your situation, your real situation. Few people did. The founding partners of Ashford Development had chosen anonymity decades ago. My preference. My partner Robert's insistence. The building staff knew, of course. The board knew. But to the world, to my own son, I was simply Theodore Ashford, comfortable retiree, living well but not extraordinarily. Keep noting what you observe, I said. Times, names, unusual requests. Already started. Mitchell pulled a small notebook from his pocket. Mrs. Ashford asked me yesterday about your mail delivery. Wanted to know if she could collect it for you, save you the trouble. I told her building policy requires owner signature for all packages. There's no such policy. There is now. I almost smiled. Thank you, Mitchell. After he left, I sat alone with my thoughts. Caroline's photograph watched me from the piano, the Steinway we'd bought together 40 years ago, when this building was just blueprints and ambition. She'd played beautifully. The silence since her death was its own kind of grief. If Marcus ever tries to take what isn't his, her voice whispered in my memory. Remember, I planned for this. Everything is already protected. Trust Eleanor. Eleanor Vance, our attorney for 30 years, the architect of every protection Caroline had insisted upon, every clause and contingency that my son had never bothered to read. I picked up my phone, sent a text. Eleanor, we need to meet, privately, tomorrow if possible. Her response came within minutes. My office, 9 a.m. I've been expecting this call. That evening, we sat together for dinner, an uncomfortable performance of family harmony. Vanessa had insisted on cooking, had taken over my kitchen with the efficiency of an occupying army. The meal was technically competent, but seasoned with an enthusiasm I didn't trust. This place is incredible, Vanessa said, gesturing with her wine glass at the city lights beyond the windows. I'd forgotten how spectacular the views are. Caroline designed most of it. I kept my voice neutral. She had exceptional taste. She certainly did. Vanessa's eyes moved to the piano. That old thing must be worth something. A Steinway, right? From the 50s? 1962, it was a wedding gift, to both of us. Sentimental value. Vanessa nodded, but I saw the calculation behind her eyes. Still, pianos like that appreciate. You should have it appraised. I know what it's worth. Marcus shifted in his seat, steering the conversation. Dad, we should talk about practical matters. Your accounts, your schedule, making sure everything's organized. What specifically concerns you? Just simplification. You're 72, living alone. There's a lot to manage here. Finances, medical appointments, the building itself. I've been managing for 3 years without difficulty. Have you, though? Vanessa's voice dripped with practiced concern. Marcus told me about the cardiologist appointment, and Mrs. Chen from 14B mentioned you seemed confused in the elevator last week. I hadn't been confused. I'd been thinking about a board proposal, distracted and silent. But Vanessa had already gathered witnesses to my supposed decline. What are you suggesting? I asked. Nothing dramatic. Marcus leaned forward, his earnest expression perfectly rehearsed. Just let us help. Start with finances, consolidate accounts, add my name for convenience. Then we can look at power of attorney, living arrangements. Power of attorney. For emergencies, in case something happens and decisions need to be made quickly. I looked at my son across the table. 44 years old, my only child. The boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle in Central Park, to read a balance sheet, to shake hands with confidence. The man who'd borrowed $2 million over the years and repaid none of it. Who'd used his mother's funeral as an opportunity to mention his inheritance timeline. How long do these things usually take? He'd asked the estate attorney 3 days after we buried her. The disbursements, I mean? I'll think about it, I said finally. That's all we ask. Marcus's relief was visible. Just think about it. We're here to help, Dad. That's all. Vanessa excused herself to the restroom. I watched her walk toward the hallway, then saw her detour, just slightly, toward my study door, testing if it was locked. It wasn't. I'd been careful to seem casual about security. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. When she returned, I noticed her phone was in her hand, recording, probably, or photographing something she'd seen through the study window. Well, I stood, began clearing plates. It's been a long day. I'll leave you two to settle in. Dad. Marcus caught my arm as I passed. I'm glad we're doing this, being family again. Mom would have wanted it. I looked at his hand on my arm, at his face, so much like Caroline's, the same eyes, the same bone structure, but twisted somehow, warped by something I still couldn't fully understand. Yes, I said quietly. Your mother had strong feelings about family. I went to my study, locked the door behind me, and sat in darkness for a long time. Later that night, I heard them talking. My study shared a wall with the guest suite, and the building's acoustics were generous. Sound carried through the heating vents in ways the original architects hadn't anticipated. He's easier than I expected. Vanessa's voice, sharp with satisfaction. Did you see how he agreed to think about it? He's already halfway to signing. Don't push too fast. Marcus, cautious. He's sharper than he looks. Mom always said so. He's 72 and living alone. What's he going to do? Fight us? A pause. The dementia narrative is working. Mrs. Chen confirmed she'll back up the elevator story, and I have a doctor lined up who will say whatever we need for the filing. What filing? Marcus, sweetie. Vanessa's voice dropped to a tone I imagined she thought was loving. We talked about this. Conservatorship. It's the only way to guarantee access before he starts giving everything away to charities or new girlfriends or whatever old men do when they're scared of dying alone. He's my father. He's a source of capital we need to secure. You want to lose everything? The creditors aren't waiting forever. That real estate deal needs funding by March, or we default. Silence. Then Marcus. How long? 6 months if we play it right. Build the case slowly. Document his confusion. Get the medical evaluation from Dr. Perkins. File in Westchester instead of Manhattan. Friendlier judges, fewer questions. And then? Then we manage his affairs, access the accounts, sell this ridiculous penthouse, has to be worth $20 million at least, and move him somewhere appropriate. He'll fight it. Let him. Vanessa laughed. What power does he have? He's a retired nobody living on savings and stubbornness. By the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. I sat in my study, in the dark, listening to my son agree to cage me like an animal. Then, I opened my laptop, pulled up an email draft I'd been working on, and typed a single line to Eleanor Vance. They're moving faster than expected. We need to move faster. Her response came at 2 a.m. Good. I've been waiting 3 years for this. All the pieces Caroline put in place are ready. They have no idea who they're dealing with. I looked at Caroline's photograph, silver-framed on my desk, at her smile, knowing and fierce even in frozen stillness. You knew, I whispered to her image. You always knew what he'd become. Then I closed the laptop and waited for morning. The next day, I would visit Eleanor. I would begin laying the groundwork for their destruction. I would let them believe they were winning while the trap assembled around them, invisible and patient. But tonight, I simply sat with the truth. My son had come to cage me. to steal everything his mother and I had built, to erase me from my own life. And he had no idea that the quiet old man he'd dismissed had been planning for this moment since the day Caroline ended, and that every piece was already in place. Let them move in, I thought. Let them document my confusion. Let them file their paperwork and consult their corrupt doctors. By the time they understand what they've walked into, there will be nowhere left to run. I turned off the study light and went to bed. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Caroline's recorded voice, made 3 years ago, said, "If Marcus ever tries to take what isn't his, remember I planned for this. Everything is already protected. Trust Eleanor." I sat in my study at 2 a.m., listening to my dead wife warn me about our living son, and felt the last pieces of denial crumble away. The first week of their occupation followed a predictable pattern. Vanessa reorganized my kitchen on day 2. I came downstairs to find Caroline's things displaced, her favorite teacups moved to a high shelf, her spice rack relocated, her cookbook collection boxed to make room. I said nothing, watched, documented. On day 3, she threw away Caroline's recipe cards. I found them in the trash while taking out garbage, handwritten notes in my wife's elegant script, the chocolate cake she'd made for every birthday, the pot roast Marcus had loved as a boy. I retrieved them, said nothing. By day 4, Marcus had begun his campaign in earnest. "Dad, I've been looking at your accounts," he said over breakfast, casual as discussing weather. "You're losing money to inflation just sitting in savings. Let me introduce you to my financial advisor. I'm comfortable with my current arrangement. But it's not smart, Dad. You're 72. You need growth, security planning, someone managing things professionally. I've been managing my own finances for 50 years. Exactly. He smiled, that patient smile people use with confused children. Times have changed. Let the experts handle it. I stirred my coffee. I'll think about it. Vanessa appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. I just got off with Dr. Perkins. He can see you next week for a wellness evaluation. Isn't that wonderful? I have a doctor. Dr. Chen is fine for routine things, but Dr. Perkins specializes in geriatric care, memory assessment, cognitive function, that sort of thing. She sat beside me, touched my hand with practiced warmth. We just want to make sure you're okay, Theodore. After that incident with the cardiologist. What incident? The missed appointment. Marcus told me you seemed confused about the date. I rescheduled it for a board meeting. A board meeting? Vanessa exchanged a glance with Marcus. What board meeting, Theodore? I caught myself. The building's ownership board, a meeting they knew nothing about. HOA matter, I said smoothly. Nothing interesting. But I saw Vanessa's eyes narrow slightly, filing away the inconsistency. That afternoon, I visited my study's hidden feature. Caroline had insisted on the wine cellar when we designed the penthouse, not for wine, for privacy. The climate-controlled room had a separate security system, its own recording capabilities, and a door that looked like a closet to casual observers. I checked the footage from the past 3 days. Day 1, Vanessa photographing documents in my study while I napped. Day 2, Marcus on the phone in the guest room, speaking to someone named Perkins, arranging the medical evaluation they'd just announced. Day 3, both of them, late at night, reviewing papers at the kitchen table. I enhanced the audio. The conservatorship filing is already done, Vanessa said. Westchester County, Judge Morrison's docket. How long until it's processed? 6 weeks if we push, longer if there's resistance. There won't be resistance. Look at him. He's already confused, can't keep his stories straight. The board meeting thing? He doesn't sit on any board. Vanessa laughed. He thinks he's sharp. That's almost sad. The penthouse alone is worth $20 million, plus whatever else he's hiding. The accountant said there are investment accounts, property holdings. We'll find everything once we have legal control. I stopped the recording. Sat in the darkness of the wine cellar, surrounded by bottles Caroline had collected over decades. 20 million for the penthouse, investment accounts, property holdings. They had no idea. This building alone, my 40% stake, was worth more than their wildest estimates. The art collection in storage, the investment portfolio Eleanor had managed for 30 years, the trust Caroline had established. They were trying to steal from a man worth $180 million while thinking they'd found a comfortable retiree with maybe 10. I drove to Marcus's former townhouse the next morning. The brownstone in the West Village had been purchased 5 years ago, a wedding gift from Vanessa's parents, I'd later learned. Now it sat with a for sale sign and what appeared to be a lien notice in the window. I took photos, made notes. A conversation with a neighbor, casual, friendly, just an old man out for a walk, revealed more. The Ashfords had left 3 months ago, missed several mortgage payments, some kind of business trouble. They seem so successful, the neighbor said, shaking her head. Always talking about investments, opportunities. Then suddenly they're gone. I thanked her, walked back to my car. The pieces were forming a picture. Marcus and Vanessa hadn't moved in to take care of me. They'd moved in because they had nowhere else to go and saw my penthouse as their solution. That evening, I made a discovery that changed everything. I'd been searching my study for a particular book when I noticed something wrong. The filing cabinet had been reorganized. Papers moved. Not missing, just examined. I checked my desk. The drawer where I kept Caroline's letters, the private correspondence we'd exchanged during my business trips, had been opened. The lock was still intact, but the drawer was slightly misaligned. Someone had picked it. Amateur work, but effective. I opened the drawer. The letters were there, but tucked beneath them was something that shouldn't be, a document I'd never seen before. Power of attorney form, pre-filled with my information, awaiting only my signature. I stew-ended it carefully. Legal language granting Marcus Ashford full authority over Theodore Ashford's financial, medical, and personal decisions. They'd planted it, planning to present it as something I'd forgotten signing or something to slip in among other papers. I photographed it, replaced it exactly as I'd found it. Then I opened my laptop and composed an email to Eleanor Vance. They're moving faster than expected. Can you meet tomorrow? Bring everything Caroline prepared. Her response came within minutes. 8 a.m., my office. I've been waiting 3 years for this. Before leaving my study, I retrieved something I'd kept hidden since Caroline's death. A small digital recorder. One of 3 she'd made in her final months, when she'd still been clear enough to understand what might have gone badly with Marcus. I'm sorry. I hoped I was wrong about him. I closed my eyes, let her voice wash over me. I've spent the last year working with Eleanor to protect you. The trust is irrevocable. Marcus can never touch it. The building ownership is structured through holding companies he'll never trace. Everything we built together is safe from him. A pause. The sound of her breathing labored near the end. But Ted, I also put something else in place, a failsafe. If Marcus ever tries to take what isn't his, if he files for conservatorship or power of attorney, or anything that suggests he's trying to control you for your money, there's a clause. I leaned forward. Eleanor has the details. When you're ready, when you're certain, she'll explain everything. Just know that I didn't leave you unprotected. I knew what Marcus was becoming. I planned for this. Her voice softened. I love you, Theodore. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to fight alongside you, but I left you the weapons you'll need. Use them. The recording ended. I sat in silence for a long time. Caroline had known. Years before her death, she'd seen what Marcus was becoming, the greed, the entitlement, the willingness to use family for personal gain. She'd watched our son change and done what she always did, planned, prepared, protected. Even from the grave, she was still taking care of me. The next morning, I left early. "Where are you going?" Vanessa intercepted me at the elevator. "Coffee with an old friend." "Which friend?" "I can drive you." "That's not necessary." "But Theodore, we worry about you out alone in the city. What if something happens?" I looked at her, really looked, for the first time since they'd arrived. 41 years old, beautiful in a careful, maintained way, eyes that calculated everything. "I've lived in this city for 50 years, I said quietly. "I know my way around." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. "At least tell us where you'll be," she called as the doors closed, "in case of emergency." I didn't answer. Eleanor Vance's office occupied a corner suite in a building I'd helped finance 30 years ago. Not that anyone knew. She stood when I entered, crossed the room, embraced me with the warmth of 3 decades of friendship. "You look tired," she said. "I've been sleeping with wolves." She guided me to her conference table, where a thick folder waited. "Caroline's preparations," Eleanor said. Everything she put in place before she ended. I opened the folder. Documents, legal filings, trust amendments, corporate structures, years of careful planning condensed into paper and ink. "The trust is bulletproof," Eleanor continued. "Irrevocable. Even with conservatorship, Marcus can't touch the assets. They're legally no longer yours. They belong to the Caroline Ashford Foundation." Foundation? Established 2 years ago. You're the lifetime beneficiary. You receive income, you live in the property, you control the investments, but the assets themselves belong to the foundation. When you die, they go to its designated mission, elder abuse prevention. I almost laughed. Caroline's final gift, protection and purpose, woven together. What about the penthouse, the building ownership? Held through 3 layers of holding companies. Even with full access to your personal accounts, Marcus would find nothing of significance. The real wealth is invisible to him. And the fail-safe she mentioned? Eleanor's expression shifted, more serious now. The morality clause. It's embedded in Caroline's will, the real will, not the version Marcus saw at the funeral. There's another version? Caroline had me prepare 2. The public version distributed her personal effects, some jewelry, modest bequests, standard stuff. But the private version... Eleanor pulled out a document, slid it across the table. "This is the one that matters." I read slowly. Legal language, carefully constructed, unmistakably Caroline's intent. Any heir who attempts legal action to gain premature access to estate assets, including but not limited to conservatorship, guardianship, or power of attorney fraud, automatically forfeits all inheritance rights. The entirety of the forfeited portion shall transfer immediately to the Caroline Ashford Foundation with public acknowledgement of the triggering act. I looked up. Public acknowledgement. Press release. Foundation announcement. Marcus's name attached to the reason the foundation received its funding. Eleanor's smile was grim. Caroline wanted consequences that would follow him forever. He doesn't know this exists. No one does. Just you, me, and the foundation's director. We've been waiting to see if we'd ever need to activate it. I thought about Marcus and Vanessa in my home. Their whispered plans. Eleanor leaned forward. "You have resources they don't know about. You have time, 6 weeks until their conservatorship hearing, and you have something else." "What?" "A charity gala." She smiled. "The Caroline Ashford Foundation's official launch. 200 guests, press coverage, major donors, all arranged quietly over the past 2 years, waiting for the right moment." "When?" 5 weeks from now. Rooftop of your building, the Penthouse terrace." I understood immediately. The perfect venue, the perfect audience, the perfect trap. "They'll be there," I said. "Marcus and Vanessa, as honored family members. They'll be there because they'll think it's their victory lap, Dad's big charity event, proof he's functional, Good publicity for their conservatorship case. Eleanor's eyes gleamed. They'll have no idea what's actually happening until it's too late. I sat back, let the plan take shape in my mind. 5 weeks. 5 weeks to document everything, to position every piece, to let Marcus and Vanessa dig their own grave while thinking they were inheriting mine. I'll need help, I said. Inside the building, people I can trust. Diana Reyes, your building manager. She's known your identity since construction. She's been documenting their behavior since they arrived. Diana knows? Caroline told her years ago, asked her to watch, to be ready. Eleanor reached across the table, squeezed my hand. You're not alone in this, Ted. Caroline made sure of that. I returned to the penthouse that afternoon. Marcus and Vanessa were waiting, concern performed with practiced skill. We were worried, Vanessa said. You were gone for hours. Long coffee. With who? You never said. An old friend. I walked past her toward my study. I'm tired. I'm going to rest. Dad. Marcus blocked my path, gentle but firm. We need to talk about the doctor's appointment. Dr. Perkins can see you Thursday. I looked at my son, 44 years old, the boy I'd raised, the man he'd become. Somewhere between the two, something had broken, or maybe it had always been broken, and I'd refused to see. Thursday is fine, I said quietly. Relief flooded his face. Great. That's great, Dad. It's just a checkup. Nothing to worry about. I'm not worried. I continued to my study, closed the door, locked it behind me. In the silence, I pulled out my phone and texted Eleanor. Thursday appointment with their doctor. Can you get me a real evaluation scheduled before then? Her response, already done. Dr. Sharma, Tuesday. She'll provide documentation that destroys any cognitive decline claims. I smiled. Caroline's preparations, Eleanor's execution, my patience. 5 weeks until the gala. 5 weeks until Marcus and Vanessa discovered that the confused old man they'd been manipulating had been 3 steps ahead of them since the day Caroline ended. I sat at my desk, surrounded by memories of my wife, and began to plan. That night, I heard them talking again through the vents. He went somewhere today, Vanessa said. Wouldn't say where, wouldn't say who. He's 72 and confused. How far could he have gone? That's what worries me. He didn't seem confused. He seemed purposeful. You're paranoid. I'm careful. There's a difference. A pause. We should move faster. Get the evaluation done, submit the supplemental filing, push for an emergency hearing. That'll look suspicious. It'll look like concerned family members protecting their elderly father, which is exactly what we are. Silence. Then Marcus. What if he's on to us? He's not. He can't be. There's no way he could know about the conservatorship filing. It's in a different county. But if he does, then we accelerate everything and deal with the complications later. One way or another, we're getting control of his assets. That's the only way out of this. I turned off the light in my study and sat in darkness. One way or another, she'd said. We'd see about that. I signed nothing, smiled at my son and said, "Let me think about it." Then went home and called the one person who knew exactly what Caroline had planned for this moment. Eleanor answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting by the phone for 3 years. The conservatorship filing arrived by courier the next morning. I hadn't expected them to move so quickly. Vanessa must have pushed Marcus to accelerate, probably worried I was getting suspicious. The documents were thick, official, stamped with the Westchester County seal. In the matter of Theodore James Ashford, alleged incapacitated person. I read every page. The allegations were detailed, specific, damning, and almost entirely fabricated. Subject exhibits confusion regarding appointments and schedules. Subject has difficulty maintaining coherent conversations. Subject has made statements suggesting paranoid ideation regarding family members. Subject requires professional management of financial and personal affairs. Attached was a medical evaluation from Dr. Harold Perkins, dated 2 weeks ago. I'd never met Dr. Perkins, never been to his office, never authorized any examination. The signature on the authorization form was a reasonable forgery of mine, close enough to fool a court clerk, but not close enough to fool a document examiner. I photographed everything, sent copies to Eleanor. Then I made breakfast and said nothing to Marcus and Vanessa when they emerged, yawning and satisfied, clearly pleased with their progress. Eleanor's office felt like a command center when I arrived that afternoon. She'd spread documents across her conference table in organized rows: the conservatorship filing, the forged authorization, Caroline's will, both versions, and a stack of corporate records I didn't immediately recognize. "They moved faster than I expected," she said, pouring coffee. "But that's fine. Fast people make mistakes. The medical evaluation is fabricated." "I know. I've already contacted Dr. Priya Sharma, your actual physician. She's prepared to provide a comprehensive competency evaluation and sworn testimony. We'll schedule it for this week." I sat down, stewarded the documents. "What about the authorization form? My signature is forged." "Already sent to a document examiner. Ink analysis, handwriting comparison. We'll have results in 72 hours. Eleanor smiled grimly. "Forging a signature on a legal filing is a felony, Ted. Your son may have just handed us a criminal case." "He's not thinking clearly. Vanessa's pushing him. That's not a defense." I knew she was right, but some part of me, the part that remembered Marcus as a boy building sandcastles on Cape Cod, still hoped there was an explanation that didn't involve my son becoming a criminal. Eleanor seemed to read my thoughts. "You can't protect him from the consequences of his own choices, Ted." Caroline understood that. That's why she put the morality clause in place. "Tell me exactly how it works." She pulled out Caroline's private will, turned to a marked page. "The clause is triggered by any legal action taken by an heir to gain premature or unauthorized access to estate assets. This includes conservatorship, guardianship, power of attorney fraud, or financial exploitation." She looked up. "Marcus filed for conservatorship. That's the trigger. The moment we present evidence of his intent, which we have from your recordings, the clause activates. And then everything changes. His entire inheritance, approximately $47 million, transfers immediately to the Caroline Ashford Foundation, not gradually, not after a court battle, immediately upon certification that the trigger conditions have been met." "And the public acknowledgement?" "Required by the clause. The foundation must issue a press statement explaining why it received the bequest. Marcus's name will be attached." Eleanor's voice softened. "Caroline wanted consequences he couldn't escape. Not prison necessarily, just truth. Public, permanent truth." I stared at the documents. $47 million. My son's inheritance, designed to destroy him if he ever tried to take it by force. Caroline had loved Marcus, had hoped, until the end, that he'd become someone worthy of that love. But she'd also seen clearly what he was becoming, and she'd prepared accordingly. "The gala," I said. "That's when we do this. That's my recommendation. 200 guests, press coverage, foundation launch, maximum visibility, maximum accountability. And maximum humiliation for my son. That's his choice, not yours. He could stop this at any point. All he has to do is withdraw the conservatorship filing and leave you alone." Eleanor leaned forward. "But he won't, will he?" I thought about Marcus's face when he'd handed me the power of attorney papers. The hunger in his eyes. The certainty that he deserved what he was trying to take. "No," I said quietly. "He won't." That evening, I visited the bank. The trust department occupied a quiet floor of a building I'd helped finance decades ago. The manager, a woman named Patricia Chen, had handled my accounts since before Marcus was born. "Mr. Ashford." She stood when I entered, gestured to a private office. I received your attorney's message. How can I help? I need to verify something. The irrevocable trust Caroline established, it's still intact? Completely. Patricia pulled up records on her screen. Assets transferred, beneficiary designations confirmed, no modifications possible without court order. Your son has no access, no authority, no legal standing to make changes. Even with conservatorship? The trust predates any conservatorship filing. The assets are no longer legally yours, they belong to the foundation. A conservator can only manage what the incapacitated person actually owns. She smiled slightly. Your wife was very thorough, Mr. Ashford. She usually was. I left the bank with documentation confirming what I already knew. Marcus was fighting for control of assets that had already slipped beyond his reach. The penthouse, the investments, the building ownership, all protected, all invisible to him. He was spending money he didn't have, filing legal papers that couldn't succeed, burning bridges that could never be rebuilt. And he had no idea. The restaurant was Marcus's choice, an upscale Italian place in the West Village, the kind of establishment where waiters remember your name and the wine list runs 40 pages. He'd suggested dinner to celebrate our new living arrangement, though I suspected the real purpose was reconnaissance. Vanessa wore a dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Marcus had somehow found another expensive suit, though I noticed the shoes were scuffed. Cash flow problems, probably. The townhouse foreclosure would have devastated their credit. Dad, you look good, Marcus said as we sat. Rested. The new arrangement is working, right? I'm sleeping well. That's what we want. Vanessa reached across the table, touched my hand with practiced warmth. Family together, supporting each other. The waiter appeared. Marcus ordered a bottle of wine that cost $400, putting it on a credit card that was probably maxed, performing wealth he no longer possessed. I've been thinking about what you said, I offered, keeping my voice mild. About simplifying my finances. Marcus's eyes sharpened. Really? At my age, maybe it makes sense to have help. I'm not as quick as I used to be. Vanessa exchanged a glance with Marcus, quick, triumphant. That's very wise, Theodore, she said. Very mature. We only want what's best for you. I know you do. The wine arrived. Marcus tasted it with theatrical expertise, nodded approval. We drank to family, to new beginnings, to cooperation. I watched them celebrate their imagined victory and felt nothing but sadness. After dinner, I walked home alone. The city was beautiful at night, lights reflecting off wet pavement, the smell of rain and exhaust, the endless energy of Manhattan flowing around me. I'd lived here for 50 years, built my career here, raised my son here, buried my wife here. Now I was preparing to destroy my only child in front of 200 witnesses. I stopped at a coffee shop, sat by the window, thought about choices. Marcus could still stop this, could withdraw the filing, apologize, leave, could choose to be the son I'd hoped he'd become instead of the predator he'd revealed himself to be. But he wouldn't. I knew that with the certainty of a father who'd watched his child grow into disappointment. My phone buzzed. Text from Eleanor. Document examiner confirmed. Signature on authorization form is definitively forged. Different ink composition, inconsistent pressure patterns. This is prosecutable. I stared at the message. Prosecutable. My son had committed a felony to try to steal from me. I typed back, keep building the file, 3 weeks until the gala. Her response, everything will be ready. Caroline's plan is airtight. I pocketed the phone, finished my coffee, walked the rest of the way home. Marcus and Vanessa were asleep when I arrived, or pretending to be. The penthouse was quiet, the city glittering beyond the windows, Caroline's piano silent in the corner. I stood in my study for a long time, looking at her photograph, I'm going to do what you asked, I said quietly. I'm going to protect myself, protect others. But Caroline, my voice caught. He's still our son. Part of me still hopes. The photograph didn't answer. Caroline's smile remained fixed, knowing, fierce. She'd understood Marcus better than I had seen what he was becoming while I'd still been hoping for change, had built protections I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Now those protections were about to activate. And my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, to tie a tie, to shake hands with confidence, was going to learn what his mother had known all along. Some lessons only consequences can teach. I turned off the study light and went to bed. 3 weeks until the gala. 3 weeks until the trap closed. 3 weeks until Marcus understood, finally and completely, who he'd tried to steal from, and who had been watching, waiting, planning all along. Diana handed me a flash drive containing 3 years of surveillance footage and said, "Your wife asked me to keep this ready. She said you'd know when the time was right." I held the small device in my palm, Caroline's final gift, assembled by the building manager who'd kept our secrets for decades. The medical evaluation happened on a Tuesday morning. Dr. Priya Sharma's office occupied the 8th floor of a building on the Upper East Side. Quiet, professional, far from anywhere Marcus or Vanessa would think to look. I'd been her patient for 10 years, ever since Caroline insisted I find a physician who understood both medicine and discretion. "Mr. Ashford." She stood when I entered, shook my hand warmly. "Eleanor briefed me on the situation. I'm sorry you're going through this. I need documentation, something that destroys any claim of cognitive decline. Then let's be thorough." For 3 hours, she ran every test imaginable: memory assessments, cognitive function evaluations, neurological examinations, blood work to rule out underlying conditions. I answered questions, completed puzzles, recalled sequences, demonstrated executive function. At the end, she sat across from me with her notes. "Theodore, you're sharper than most people half your age. Your cognitive function is excellent. Your memory is intact. There's no evidence of dementia, decline, or incapacity of any kind. Can you put that in writing? I'll provide a comprehensive evaluation report, sworn affidavit, and I'm prepared to testify in court if necessary." She paused. "The evaluation they're using, from Dr. Perkins, is either fabricated or based on an examination that never occurred. That's malpractice at minimum, possibly fraud. Eleanor is already investigating." "Good. Because what they're attempting isn't just legally wrong, it's medically indefensible." She handed me a folder. "Preliminary report, full documentation within 48 hours. I left her office with 12 pages of proof that I was exactly who I'd always been, a man in full possession of his faculties, being targeted by his own son. Diana Reyes was waiting when I returned to the building. She intercepted me in the lobby, her expression carefully neutral for the security cameras, but her eyes urgent. "Mr. Ashford, a word in my office?" I followed her through the service corridor to the building management suite, a space I hadn't visited in years, though I'd helped design it decades ago. The walls held photographs from construction, including one of me and Caroline at the groundbreaking ceremony, both of us young and hopeful. Diana closed the door. "They're accelerating," she said without preamble. "Your son requested access to the building's financial records this morning. Said he was reviewing his father's investments as part of estate planning." "What did you tell him?" "That ownership records are confidential and he'd need proper authorization." She paused. He didn't like that answer. His wife suggested they might need to file a complaint about building management with the co-op board. Let them try. Diana's expression shifted, something between amusement and fierce loyalty. "Mr. Ashford, I've worked in this building since your wife hired me during construction. 40 years. She told me things about the ownership structure, about you, about what might happen someday." She opened a drawer, pulled out a flash drive. She also asked me to keep records, just in case. I took the drive. Records of what? Everything. Your son's behavior since he started visiting 3 years ago, the arguments with his mother before she passed, his questions about property values, inheritance timelines, your health. Diana's voice hardened. Mrs. Ashford was worried. She asked me to document anything concerning, so I did. 3 years of documentation. Every incident, every overheard conversation, every complaint from staff about how your son and his wife treated them. She met my eyes. Your wife was a remarkable woman, Mr. Ashford. She saw this coming long before anyone else did. I thought about Caroline in her final months, weakening, fading, but still planning, still protecting me even as she prepared to leave. The surveillance system, I said, the smart home recordings, archived separately from the building's main servers, encrypted, only accessible with credentials your wife established years ago. Diana slid a piece of paper across the desk. The access codes. She wanted you to have them when the time was right. I looked at the codes, at the flash drive, at this woman who'd kept my wife's secrets for years without ever being asked to reveal them. Why now? Because I heard them last night. Diana's jaw tightened. Through the service corridor. Your daughter-in-law was on the phone with someone, a lawyer, I think. She said they needed to move faster, said the conservatorship hearing should be expedited because you were becoming suspicious. Did she say anything else? She said once they had control, they'd sell the penthouse immediately. Move you to a facility in New Jersey where no one would ask questions. Diana's voice dropped. She laughed when she said it, Mr. Ashford. Laughed about putting you away. I absorbed this quietly. New Jersey. A facility. No questions asked. Caroline had been right about everything. That afternoon I visited the garden. Central Park's conservatory garden had been Caroline's favorite place in the city. Formal hedges, seasonal flowers, benches where we'd sat together hundreds of times over the decades. I found our usual spot near the wisteria pergola and sat alone. A letter had been waiting in Diana's files, sealed, addressed to me in Caroline's handwriting, dated 6 months before her death. My darling Ted. If Diana has given you this, then Marcus has finally shown you who he really is. I'm sorry. I hoped I was wrong about him. I hoped the boy we raised would grow into someone worthy of our love. But hope isn't a strategy. You taught me that, in business and in life. So I made plans. Eleanor has the details, the trust, the clause, the foundation. Everything is already in place. You just need to decide when to use it. Remember, this isn't revenge. It's protection. For you, for our legacy, for the next family Marcus might target if someone doesn't stop him. I love you. I always will. And I know you'll do the right thing, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Trust Eleanor. Trust Diana. Trust yourself. Yours always, Caroline. I read it 3 times. Let the tears come quietly. An old man alone on a park bench, grieving a woman who'd loved him enough to plan for this moment. Then I folded the letter, put it in my pocket, and walked back to finish what she'd started. The wine cellar recording happened by accident. Or rather, I made it look like an accident. That evening, I mentioned to Marcus that I was planning to donate some bottles to the charity gala, rare vintages Caroline had collected over the years. Would he help me select them? He agreed immediately, probably seeing an opportunity to inventory what else I might be hiding. We descended to the climate-controlled room together. I fumbled with the access code, letting him watch me enter it, made a show of forgetfulness. Dad, let me help. He reached past me, entered the code himself. The door opened. What he didn't know, the security system recorded everything, not just video, audio too. High definition, time-stamped, automatically backed up to a server he'd never find. We walked through the racks. I pointed out bottles, shared memories of trips Caroline and I had taken to acquire them. Marcus listened with performed patience, his eyes calculating the value of each vintage. "These must be worth a fortune," he said finally. "Caroline loved wine. I loved Caroline. The money was never the point. Still, you should have these appraised for insurance purposes. Perhaps." We selected bottles for the gala. As we finished, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, typed a quick response. "Vanessa," he explained, "checking on dinner." "Of course." We climbed back upstairs. At the door, Marcus paused. "Dad, I know we've had our differences, but I want you to know, I'm glad we're doing this, being family again." I looked at my son, 44 years old, the boy who'd built sand castles on Cape Cod, who'd cried at his mother's funeral, who'd become someone I didn't recognize. "Family is important," I said quietly. "It's everything." He went to find Vanessa. I returned to my study, pulled up the wine cellar footage on my laptop. The recording was perfect. Clear audio, clear video. Marcus entering the code himself, proving he had unauthorized access to secure areas. His comments about appraisals and fortune. The calculation in his eyes as he surveyed what he planned to steal. One more piece of evidence. One more nail in the coffin he was building for himself. Eleanor called that evening. The document examiner finished. The signature on the medical authorization is definitively forged. Different ink composition, inconsistent stroke patterns, pressure variations that don't match your known handwriting. That's prosecutable. Very. I've also confirmed that Dr. Perkins has no record of ever treating you. His office claims the examination happened at your home, but there's no documentation, no notes, no billing records, nothing except the letter submitted with the conservatorship filing. He's lying. Worse, he's part of the conspiracy. Eleanor's voice sharpened. I've requested his full patient records through legal channels. If he's done this before, provided false evaluations for conservatorship cases, we'll find it. The gala is in 10 days. Everything will be ready. The foundation paperwork is finalized. The morality clause documentation is certified. The press releases are drafted, waiting for your approval. She paused. Ted, once we do this, there's no going back. Your son's name will be publicly attached to elder abuse. He'll lose everything. The inheritance, his reputation, possibly his freedom if the DA decides to prosecute the forgery. I thought about Marcus as a child, learning to ride a bicycle, building with blocks, laughing at my terrible jokes. Then I thought about him in the wine cellar, calculating the value of everything his mother had loved. Do it, I said. Prepare everything. And the guest list? Make sure Marcus and Vanessa are invited, prominently, as honored family members. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. You want them there. I want them to see it happen, to understand in front of everyone who matters exactly what they've lost and why. I paused. Caroline would have wanted that too. Yes, Eleanor said softly. She would have. After we hung up, I sat in my study surrounded by Caroline's things, her books on the shelves, her photographs on the walls, the Steinway piano in the living room, silent since her death. 10 days until the gala. 10 days until Marcus learned that the confused old man he'd tried to cage had been 3 steps ahead of him since the moment his mother drew her last breath. Caroline had given me the weapons. Diana had given me the evidence. Eleanor had given me the strategy. Now all that remained was the execution. That night, I heard them again through the vents. 10 days until the gala, Vanessa said. We need the conservatorship expedited before then. Why before? Because once he's declared incapacitated, we can challenge any donations he makes, claim diminished capacity, get the assets back. She paused. I talked to our lawyer. He says if we push, we can get an emergency hearing. Claim Ted's mental state is deteriorating rapidly and requires immediate intervention. What about the medical evaluation? The one from his real doctor? We don't know he has one, and even if he does, Dr. Perkins will testify that his evaluation supersedes any previous assessment. Recent observations take precedence. And if the judge doesn't buy it, then we appeal, drag it out, make it so expensive and exhausting that the old man gives up and lets us manage things. Silence. Then Marcus. What if he doesn't give up? Vanessa's laugh was cold. He's 72 and alone. How much fight does he have left? I turned off the light in my study and sat in darkness. How much fight, I thought. More than you can imagine. 10 days. The trap was set, the evidence was gathered, the foundation was ready. And my son had no idea that every word he'd spoken, every plan he'd made, every scheme he'd constructed was already documented, archived, and waiting to destroy him. Caroline's voice echoed in my memory. Trust yourself. I did. I always had. And in 10 days, Marcus would learn exactly what that trust had built. Raymond Cross called that evening. The rooftop is ready, 200 guests, 12 media outlets, and Marcus RSVP'd yes, said he wouldn't miss his father's special night for anything. I set down the phone and looked at Caroline's photograph. 5 days until the gala. 5 days until my son learned what his mother had always known. The morning began at the bank. Patricia Chen met me in the private trust department, her office hushed and wood-paneled. She'd handled Caroline's affairs for 20 years, understood discretion the way surgeons understand silence. Mr. Ashford. She spread documents across her desk. Everything is exactly as your wife arranged. The irrevocable trust transferred all major assets 3 years ago. Your son has no legal claim to anything. Even with conservatorship? The trust predates any filing. These assets belong to the Caroline Ashford Foundation now. You're simply the lifetime beneficiary. She paused. Your wife was remarkably thorough. I signed the final verification papers, watched Patricia notarize each page. 3 years of Caroline's planning, reduced to ink and signatures. One more thing, I said. The morality clause. I need it certified and ready for presentation. Patricia nodded slowly. You're activating it. My son filed conservatorship papers to steal from me. That triggers the clause. I'll have everything prepared by Friday. Eleanor's office felt different that afternoon. Sharper, more focused. She'd assembled the complete file, conservatorship documents, forged signatures, wine cellar recordings, Diana's incident logs, Dr. Sharma's evaluation. 2 inches of evidence neatly organized. The foundation launch is confirmed, she said. Raymond has the venue ready, press releases drafted. The moment you give the word, everything goes public. And the morality clause? Certified copy from the bank. Witnessed statement from me as executor. Eleanor's voice softened. Caroline wrote a letter to be read at the activation. Did you know? I hadn't. She handed me an envelope. Caroline's handwriting. To be opened when necessary. I'll read it later. Ted. Eleanor touched my arm. Are you certain about this? Public exposure. Your son's name attached to elder abuse. There's no taking it back. I thought about Marcus and Vanessa upstairs in my penthouse, planning my institutionalization, laughing about it. I'm certain. The cemetery was quiet in late afternoon light. Caroline's grave sat beneath an oak tree, her favorite spot, chosen years before she needed it. I brought flowers, sat on the bench we'd installed after the funeral. 5 days, I said to her headstone. 5 days until I do what you asked. Wind moved through the leaves. Somewhere distant, traffic hummed. I didn't want to believe it about Marcus. Even after everything, part of me hoped. I stopped, breathed. But you knew. You always knew what he'd become. I opened her letter. My darling Ted. If Eleanor has given you this, then the clause is being activated. I'm sorry it came to this. I'm sorry Marcus couldn't be the son we raised him to be. But I'm not sorry for protecting you. That was never a choice. It was a promise. The same promise you made to me 50 years ago, when we were young and foolish and believed love could conquer anything. It can't conquer everything, but it can outlast betrayal. It can build walls that greed cannot climb. It can leave behind weapons for the ones we love to defend themselves. Use the claws. Protect yourself. And then, my love, live. Really live. Not hiding anymore. Not pretending to be less than you are. You are Theodore James Ashford. You built an empire. You built a family. You built a life worth protecting. Now show them who they tried to destroy. I love you, always. Caroline. I read it 3 times. Let the tears come quietly. Then I folded the letter, put it in my pocket, and walked back to finish what she'd started. The penthouse was quiet when I returned. Marcus and Vanessa were at dinner somewhere, celebrating probably, confident their plan was working. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for next week. They thought they were winning. I walked through rooms Caroline had designed, touched the piano she'd played, looked at photographs of our life together. 50 years of partnership reduced to frames on walls. The rooftop terrace was set for the gala. Caterers had begun arrangements. The Steinway would be moved up for the event. 200 chairs, 12 media stations, the Manhattan skyline as backdrop. I stood at the railing, looking out at the city we'd conquered together. 5 days, I whispered to the night. 5 days until Marcus understood. 5 days until the trap closed. 5 days until Caroline's final gift was delivered. Publicly, permanently, irreversibly. I went inside, locked my study door, and began reviewing the final details. The game was almost over. And my son had no idea he'd already lost. Raymond Cross called that evening. The rooftop is ready. 200 guests, 12 media outlets, and Marcus RSVP'd yes, said he wouldn't miss his father's special night for anything. I set down the phone and looked at Caroline's photograph. 5 days until the gala. 5 days until my son learned what his mother had always known. The morning began at the bank. Patricia Chen met me in the private trust department, her office hushed and wood-paneled. She'd handled Caroline's affairs for 20 years, understood discretion, the way surgeons understand silence. Mr. Ashford. She spread documents across her desk. Everything is exactly as your wife arranged. The irrevocable trust transferred all major assets 3 years ago. Your son has no legal claim to anything. Even with conservatorship? The trust predates any filing. These assets belong to the Caroline Ashford Foundation now. You're simply the lifetime beneficiary. She paused. Your wife was remarkably thorough. I signed the final verification papers, watched Patricia notarize each page. 3 years of Caroline's planning, reduced to ink and signatures. One more thing, I said. The morality clause. I need it certified and ready for presentation. Patricia nodded slowly. You're activating it. My son filed conservatorship papers to steal from me. That triggers the clause. I'll have everything prepared by Friday. Eleanor's office felt different that afternoon, sharper, more focused. She'd assembled the complete file, conservatorship documents, forged signatures, wine cellar recordings, Diana's incident logs, Dr. Sharma's evaluation. 2 inches of evidence, neatly organized. The foundation launch is confirmed, she said. Raymond has the venue ready. Press releases drafted. The moment you give the word, everything goes public. And the morality clause? Certified copy from the bank. Witnessed statement from me as executor. Eleanor's voice softened. Caroline wrote a letter to be read at the activation. Did you know? I hadn't. She handed me an envelope. Caroline's handwriting. To be opened when necessary. I'll read it later. Ted. Eleanor touched my arm. Are you certain about this? Public exposure. Your son's name attached to elder abuse. There's no taking it back. I thought about Marcus and Vanessa upstairs in my penthouse, planning my institutionalization, laughing about it. I'm certain. The cemetery was quiet in late afternoon light. Caroline's grave sat beneath an oak tree, her favorite spot, chosen years before she needed it. I brought flowers. Sat on the bench we'd installed after the funeral. 5 days, I said to her headstone. 5 days until I do what you asked. Wind moved through the leaves. Somewhere distant, traffic hummed. I didn't want to believe it about Marcus. Even after everything, part of me hoped. I stopped, breathed. But you knew. You always knew what he'd become. I opened her letter. My darling Ted, if Eleanor has given you this, then the clause is being activated. I'm sorry it came to this. I'm sorry Marcus couldn't be the son we raised him to be. But I'm not sorry for protecting you. That was never a choice. It was a promise. The same promise you made to me 50 years ago when we were young and foolish and believed love could conquer anything. It can't conquer everything, but it can outlast betrayal. It can build walls that greed cannot climb. It can leave behind weapons for the ones we love to defend themselves. Use the clause, protect yourself, and then, my love, live, really live, not hiding anymore, not pretending to be less than you are. You are Theodore James Ashford. You built an empire. You built a family. You built a life worth protecting. Now show them who they try to destroy. I love you. Always. Caroline. I read it 3 times. Let the tears come quietly. Then I folded the letter, put it in my pocket, and walked back to finish what she'd started. The penthouse was quiet when I returned. Marcus and Vanessa were at dinner somewhere, celebrating probably, confident their plan was working. The conservatorship hearing was scheduled for next week. They thought they were winning. I walked through rooms Caroline had designed, touched the piano she'd played, looked at photographs of our life together. 50 years of partnership reduced to frames on walls. The rooftop terrace was set for the gala. Caterers had begun arrangements. The Steinway would be moved up for the event. 200 chairs, 12 media stations, the Manhattan skyline as backdrop. I stood at the railing, looking out at the city we'd conquered together. 5 days, I whispered to the night. 5 days until Marcus understood. 5 days until the trap closed. 5 days until Caroline's final gift was delivered, publicly, permanently, irreversibly. I went inside, locked my study door, and began reviewing the final details. The game was almost over, and my son had no idea he'd already lost.